I'm not aware. I'm not aware of the particulars of the complaint of abuse of office. That has not been drawn to my attention. So I'm unwilling to speculate as to the nature of the alleged abuse. I don't think that answers your question, but I'm doing the best I can to answer based on my.
Has Ms. Puleiwai mentioned what is investigation against Ms.
I was told in very broad terms it's abuse of office, but I have not been told as to the details of the alleged abuse of office.
What about Ms. Puleiwai? You've mentioned that she has a personal vested interest in helping one of the candidates up for Commissioner for FICAC, and her not handing over this investigation to Fiji Police Force. Is she going to be questioned as well on her interest in this?
Well, I'm not the Commissioner of Police, or I don't work for CID, so I'm not going to speculate as to what another agency might or might not do. All I disclosed was a couple of facts. Miss Malimali applied. She applied successfully. She was appointed yesterday to start today. And the first day that she walks into the office, she's arrested by her staff, presumably on the instruction of the acting deputy, who also applied for the job. I can't describe that other than to say that it has all the hallmarks of a conflict.
So, were you consulted before Ms. Malimali was appointed the commissioner?
The answer to that is yes. I was consulted as per the Constitution, and I then became aware at that point that there was a complaint against her, and I then conveyed to the Commission, the Judicial Services Commission, that in light of the complaint, the appointment, my view, was the appointment should be on hold, because the complaint, in my mind, had indicated to me that there should be a pause. Then following that, I was copied unsolicited correspondence from the Electoral Commission, signed by all 5 commissioners. Nemani Mati, Roti Nokin Doknivalu, Nalini Singh, Reginald Khan, and Dr. Arthur Emerson Bain. And I'll just quote from this paragraph. We believe there has been nothing in the actions of the Electoral Commission chair that can be construed as interference with the appointment of or work of the supervised elections, or that is an abuse of office. When I read that, my view about the pause changed. And I was unable, in light of the unanimous views of 3 members of the Judicial Services Commission, to go back with a rational, objective, evidence-based response to convey my opinion that there was a legal obstruction to her appointment.
So basically your views changed after the letter from the Electoral Commission, and as a member of the COC, did you check or Was there any resignation letter given by Ms. Malimali?
I haven't checked that. I'm not the appointing authority for the head of FICAC. But the short answer is that no, I didn't check. I don't think that's necessarily my duty to check. There's an appointments process, but I would expect that is a housekeeping matter. I don't think we can be overly pedantic about this. She's a senior lawyer. She obviously would understand, and I don't want to speculate about this because I haven't spoken to Ms. Malimali. She would understand that you can't hold two positions, and everybody understands that. She would, of all people, she would understand that. It's just these things happen very quickly. And I think you've got to give people some breathing space as well.
So you mentioned that you see no reason why to oppose the processes of how Ms. Malimali is appointed to this position. We have political critics of government, former Prime Minister Mahendra Chaudhry. We have opposition member of parliament criticizing that particular appointment, saying it's a conflict of interest, given that there is an active investigation of Ms. Malimali. As a chief legal advisor to the government, what is your opinion on that?
Look, I understand completely where they're coming from. But, there is a context, and there are two sides to the story. As far as I'm aware, and advice that I've received, the steps laid out in the Constitution for the appointment of the Commissioner have been followed. I have not seen any departure from those steps that would concern me as government's chief legal advisor. And I did offer the opinion early on in the interview, in the press conference, that yes, if there's this complaint, there's no reason, for example, why the police, which is an independent organization, cannot itself investigate. There's nothing to stop the police from investigating her at the same time. But if there's a complaint against anyone, and immediately, you see, the law is such that in the FICAC legislation, once a complaint is laid and a charge is laid, there is no what I would call in legal terms, there's no evidential threshold. Once the complaint is laid and the charge is laid, you can frustrate an appointments process simply by laying a charge. The capacity for mischief is large and worrying. And as I said, if you look at this legislation, which is the FICAC legislation, they've got a $10 million budget. And they've got, I think, 100 staff. And if you look at the scheme of the law, they're not answerable to anyone. The FICAC is legally obliged to keep me updated from time to time on what they do, because I'm kind of the line minister. But if you look at the Constitution, I think which is in front of me here, it's section 115, FICAC is not, it's independent and is not subject to the control of any other person or authority. Section 115, subsection 6, the performance of its functions or the exercise of authority and powers, the Commission shall be independent and not subject to the direction of or control of any person or authority. So the reach, the scope of powers of FICAC are enormous. So, I think there should be a system of checks and balances. I think you will understand that.
Also, speaking about independence and investigation, there is numbers of ministers, government ministers, who is under investigated by the FICAC. What is your reassurance to the people, given that all we have gone through now is the changing of leaders in FICAC, and now we've gone it again today? What is your reassurance to the public that they should still believe in FICAC?
Look, I mean, that's a fair question. There's no change of leadership. The leadership has been vacuumed for a couple of months since the substantive head left. I think he was a Sri Lankan gentleman. So there's no change of leadership. On the contrary, there's a confirmation of leadership. Miss Puleiwai was the acting deputy commissioner. She wasn't the substantive deputy commissioner. She was acting. So I just wanted to correct the misimpression. There's a change of leadership. There is the appointment of a leader. There is no change of leadership. That's the first point. The second point is, I do recall that Miss Puleiwai, in a previous interview, I can't remember whether it is a print or radio, where she herself said that in the past, FICAC was subject to dictation and instructions from other persons or authorities. So she's gone into an institution on her own admission, an institution which has been discredited and compromised in the past. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect that things will change overnight. We've inherited this government has inherited this, and it will take time to have the reset. The confidence of the people of Fiji is needed, but it's not going to happen overnight. It will take leadership, it will take training, it will take the values of FICAC as an organization to be re-examined and practiced.
So given,
Yeah, you and then you.
so given the complaint that's against and investigations are ongoing, you talked about presumption of interest. But
Innocence.
What assurance, right? Innocence. What assurances are there? Can you give the public that she won't interfere with that process? The complaint, investigation that's
Yeah.
done against
Okay.
her?
No, that's a good question. Look, I can't give you an assurance that it won't rain tomorrow. Now, with respect, not wanting to be frivolous, Fiji is a small place. I think Miss Malimali is intelligent enough to understand, especially working at FICAC with all the eyes now on her, that if she was silly enough to interfere with investigations in relation to her, then her position would be untenable. I'm not under law able to direct or influence. I've just read you out the constitutional provision in section 115, what she should or should not do. But she's a lawyer of some standing. She also has access to legal advice and friends who are lawyers. I'm confident that she will do, and I hope she will do the right thing and keep at arm's length from the complaint that relates to her, to ensure that it is processed in a way that is consistent with integrity. Have I answered your question?
So have you perhaps sought an explanation from Ms. Puleiwai as to why she carried out what she did?
I've had to be careful in the sense that from where I sit, I am mindful of the fact that if I probe too deeply, I could be accused of interference and then myself become the subject of a FICAC investigation for interfering with FICAC. You see how tricky the landscape is? The other question is, this whole thing erupted this morning. I've had to leave the parliamentary benches to come to attend to the complexities and the different layers that have attached to this whole set of problems that arose from the arrest of the new head of FICAC. But you can see how tricky it is. Section 115 says that FICAC is not subject to the control or authority or management of any other person of authority. And so there's a thin line between being interested and being advised and telling them what to do. yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. And the next thing I'll have FICAC coming on my doorstep and then lodging a complaint that I'm now the subject of investigation. Yeah, it's in some quarters there's a perception that FICAC is roguish. It has become rogue. You do the math. I'm not going to draw the conclusions for you.
Sir, how long will the public playing this nonsense that you said you didn't want to go deeper into this? It's like we're playing a game that we're not aware of the rules. Any time frame where there's any assurance to the general public when you will cement any concrete decision on all that's happening?
I'm not sure what the question is. A concrete decision on what?
You mentioned that it was way more, personal interest of the FICAC side of things. But what I'm lost. We go on the FICAC side of things, but let me formulate my question, you can say.
I think you do that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand your own question,
Yes.
don't expect me to understand your question. Yes, it's you then you.
Clarification, sir. Just clarify this for me in
It's
layman's terms. Does Ms. Malimali remain the chairperson of the Electoral Commission on the same matter that she's been appointed as Commissioner FICAC now?
I think that was the question that was asked, and I answered it.
She might have to give up one.
No, there's not a question I have to. Not might. You can't be holding two positions at the same time.
That's why, sir.
That's the housekeeping matter that I would expect it to be attended to with some expedition, some speed. It's impossible. You can't be chair of the Electoral Commission and FICAC head at the same time. But as I said, you have to allow, first of all, the process to take place, and you have to allow people the time in which to step down, because these things happen quite rapidly.
Wouldn't it be right for the investigation to complete and then for Barbara Malimali to take up the position?
Yeah, but in the ideal world, you talk about investigations. How long is a piece of string? The investigation could be 1 month. The investigation could be 12 months. Do we continue to leave that organization without a leader? I mean, there are ways that this can be dealt with. Look, the whole situation is not ideal. You know that it's not ideal. But the cards we've been dealt this hand. I'm not the appointing authority, but our job is as best we can to align what's happening with the law and to ensure that due process is followed and the actions that are taken are proportionate and reasonable. It's not an ideal situation. I accept that. But it has happened. The appointment has been made. And we have to move forward in a way that reduces any kind of hemorrhaging and damage to the institution. But as I said, and I just wanted to underscore that, Miss Malimali would be unwise and very much aware that she's now in the public domain. Fiji is a small place, that if she were to try and compromise the investigations and the process in relation to her complaint, she herself would be compromised in a way that would make her tenure as the new leader precarious.
So was Ms. Puleiwai one of the 4 people who were shortlisted?
I don't know whether she was shortlisted, because the applications for the post don't come to me because I'm not the Judicial Services Commission. But I can tell you, because it's public knowledge, she was unsuccessful. I didn't make that determination. The Judicial Services made Commission made that determination.
So some might say Ms. Malimali's appointment is a political one, taking into consideration your message to FICAC when you first visited after your appointment as the AG. Maybe just your message to those that are saying this.
That whose appointment is political?
Ms. Malimali's,
In what sense is it political?
in the sense that she's closely related to this government.
Look, everybody has close relationships to everybody, either by village or kin or matangali or marriage or work or blood. How do you measure closeness to the government? And why should closeness to the government without more be a disabling or disqualifying factor from applying or being confirmed in a position? If that were the yardstick, most people wouldn't be able to accept or appointments for any position. Fiji is a very small place. Fiji is a very small place, so I don't think that's a reasonable yardstick for saying you can't be appointed because you are close to the government, whatever that means. Many of us have friends right across the political spectrum, but that doesn't mean if there's a change of government and you apply for a job and you get an appointment, that means there's been bias or prejudgment. At a certain point, you've got to trust the process. I don't know whether Miss Malimali is close to the government, and maybe she is, maybe she isn't. But the point is, there were two judges and one senior magistrate. They were part of the appointments process. Are you questioning their integrity? I don't think so. Think about it. I'll just repeat what I just said. Miss Malimali was appointed by the Judicial Services Commission. None of them are politicians. There's no evidence that any politician influenced or called members of the Judicial Services Commission, is there? I'm not aware of any such allegation. And that's why sometimes speculation without evidence is disconcerting and dangerous, because it could lead you to a conclusion which is not evidence-based. Have you reframed your question?
Yes.
I'm happy to answer it.
Sir, you mentioned that everyone is central for the rule of law, everyone should abide by it. You mentioned that the case is still active.
Which case, sorry?
The Barbara's case.
Yeah.
If she loses that case, will the decision be reversed?
Look, that's hypothetical. Can we cross that bridge when we get to it? There is a process, and it would be unwise for me to speculate on whether the complaint against her has evidentiary basis beyond a standard of criminal proof, beyond all reasonable doubt. We don't know. I don't know the charge. I don't know the evidence, and I'm not going to be judge and prosecutor and jury at the same time. I think that would be unwise on my part and unfair on the person. And I don't think you'd like to be tried by the prosecutor and the judge and the jury at the same time. Nobody would be. So in the short answer to your question is, I'm unable and unwilling to speculate as to what might happen in the future. That's a separate course of action that will take its own course. What?
So,
One last question.
Yes, one last question from me, sir. This is regards to TRC. Chapter 10 of the Constitution speaks about immunity. The government is pushing for the Fiji's Truth and Reconciliation. Now, how does the clause for that immunity part place when the government is pushing for this Truth and Reconciliation?
And your question is?
The question is how, the coup makers, let's say, instigators, are protected under that clause, the immunity clause in Chapter 10. The government is pushing for this TRC. The military is not part of the consultation. what is your advice to government? Would you encourage them? Because we have attended this consultation and they've
Which consultation have you
the
attended?
workshops
Yeah.
that has been set up by the steering committee,
Right.
and the military is absent. What would you advise, given that you want the government needs to earn the public's confidence in this establishment of this commission? Would you encourage them for the military to come in? Because I understand the military has its own internal program.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a parallel process. And can I just say that with the consultations that you alluded to, the consultations are with respect to settling the policy underpinnings which will form part of the legislation to legally embed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You've talked about immunity. Yes, I get that in Chapter 10. But as I understand the motivation behind the TRC, that was to draw a line, so to speak, with our past and allow persons or people with a sense of grievance who have been impacted in some way or another by a past political event or disruption as a victim or as a perpetrator, just to come forth and say, look, this is my story, I've been hurt, or I was a perpetrator, I want to put my hands up and get this off my chest. So the architects behind this proposal, as I understand it, had conceived it as an opportunity for us as a country to release ourselves from bondage or from hurt or from guilt so that we can move forward as a nation. Now, how that will pan out in the future remains to be seen, because the bill is still in draft form. The content of the bill has not yet been settled. So these consultations, and I'm sure the military will be included at some stage. I certainly hope they will be included, because the military is obviously a key institution, and their views do matter. They are responsible for external defense and security. I think that's the best answer that I can get.